Okay. You guys, we are live. So first of all, to everybody who is showing up and attending this, we really appreciate it. And we're really excited to have you here. So I always like to wait a couple seconds to see how many more people are going to join before we really kind of start digging into it. But the I love doing these lives, and I love to invite different people to the table to have conversations. And when you and I first met, we didn't really know each other, and then we started really kind of digging into each other's background, and we really connected over AI and a lot of the stuff that people talk about AI, and they have no idea what they're talking about, right? Like negligible information. And so really the whole point of this is to really talk about how AI is transforming career landscape. So I would love for you to introduce yourself and you have a lot of followers, so a bunch of people already know who you are. But for those who don't, I'd love you to introduce yourself so people can know a little bit more about you and what it is that you do.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. I'm Marie Ziminoff, the CEO of Career Thought Leaders, and we train career services providers. So career coaches, resume writers. We have a big community around the world that is focused on doing the best work that they can do to help people love what they do and find work that they can do sustainably and be employable throughout their lifespan. So I'm just thrilled to be here talking about AI because, of course, it's not really new in the career space. And I look forward to sharing a little bit more about that.
Well, okay, so I'll do a little introduction. So I'm Jennifer Seth. I am the CEO of Intry Careers, and we are a technology platform that we use AI to help figure out how resumes, where we started was how to get resumes through applicant tracking system software and how to address some of the bias that can be built in by using software, and particularly AI and machine learning and, patterned AI, contextual AI, natural language processing, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think our business has certainly evolved using AI, right? And I think it's still the Wild West. Would you kind of agree with that? It's sort of this work in progress, kind of an evolution in the space.
Technology, it really always is. So yeah, I mean, people are trying to figure out how to make it work for them.
So one of the things that is important to us as a company, right, is to sort of bridge the gap where technology and humanity intersect. And we always get so many questions about what does this mean and what are you guys doing and how does it work? And so we made a really big pivot in our business to utilize AI for resume writers, for career coaches, to give everyone sort of a strategic advantage. We haven't launched it yet, though, so we're not really going to talk about that. But yet, Lindsay's going to be like, yes, Jen, you are going to talk about that. But so AI is transforming how we approach career development, right? But it's the human connection, yes, the empathy, the insight, the relationships that I think we can all agree is irreplaceable, right? Like you can't replace the human component. So you've long been a champion for using AI as a tool rather than a replacement. And when you think of the human side of career development is more important now than ever with these advancements, like where do you see them bridging the gap? Like where are the benefits? What are maybe not the benefits? And, really shine a light in what it is that you do and how you spread the word.
Yeah. And I think when we look at what's going on in the world right now, there's a loneliness epidemic. So when you think, oh, the technology could do this work, it's not about what it can do or what it could do. It's what makes sense for it to do. And people need connection with people. We need people to help us process. We need people that we can talk to and they can reflect things back. And could technology do some of that now? Maybe. Will it be able to in the future? For sure. But that doesn't mean that even when it can do those things, it'll replace the human aspect of what people need as a human. right? As a human, we need other human interaction. And that's what a coach gives to you, is someone that is there for your purpose instead of a lot of the other people in our lives. They've got their own agenda, right? Our spouse,
Right.
our kids. And so a coach is there because you are their agenda. That they're there to help you. And the tools are amazing because what they can do is actually make sure that the coach has more time to pay attention to the person rather than the process, the research, whatever it might be, that we're taking our focus away from the person and doing the thing instead of helping that person through whatever it might be that they need to transform and get what they want out of the situation that they're in.
I mean, you said so many different things, and I'm going to try to I want to circle back to a couple of them. So one is, I think all of us as business leaders, CEOs, career coaches, all of those things, we can get sucked into the process, into the technical process, right? Like checking the boxes. Okay, calendar invites. Did you fill out these forms? Did you do this? Did you instead of being like, so where do you want to go? Are you in the right career path? How do you feel about this? Does this bring you joy? What are your skill gaps? How do we figure out what those are? What's the delta between where you are and where you want to go? If you want to make a pivot, what do you do? What does that look like? And if you're so busy doing the things that AI can do for you, you can be exponentially more productive and you can help more people. Ergo, you can make more money as a career coach, right?
Right, and your clients get better results, and it's about presence. So what I find is that in coaching, right, we teach how do you stay present with that person and
Mm-hmm.
how do you help them come up to their own conclusions. And this is where, like, yes, AI can coach you, but I wish they'd call them AI advisors, because at least at this point, for most of the tools I've demoed, when you're talking to the tool, even if it asks you a question, it's really giving you advice. So I was doing one of the tools, I was demoing it, and it says, well, have you thought about this? That's not
Mm-hmm.
really a coaching question. That's advice, right? They're saying you should do this, but they're phrasing it in a question because they're trying to be a coach. Whereas true coaching is really helping someone figure out, well, what do you think the next step is? And we might give you some ideas or options, but we're not going to give you advice for the most part, because I don't know about you. I think you have kids too, but I have young kids and I know what happens when you tell someone what to do. They turn around and do the exact opposite. And
Yeah.
although an adult might be nicer about it, they do the same thing, which is why
So,
advising isn't as powerful as coaching.
yeah. I mean, yeah, sorry, I just had a parental flashback of like, it's just that I love that color on you. And then they go and change into something else. You're like, but it's okay. Okay, I'm just gonna keep that inside my head for next time. I think while AI can do a lot, like, right, we can help with cover letters, we can help with resumes, we can help with scheduling, right? AI can do all of those things, we can do all of those things, but we can't give you the emotional intelligence, right? We can't give you that secret sauce that's going to be the difference between good and great. And and one of the things that I see a lot on LinkedIn and other social media platforms, and honestly, when people reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can tell if it's been auto generated, right? I mean, it's, when this first came out, and businesses and schools were all like, oh my God, how are we going to deal with this? And how are we going to know if this person actually wrote their thesis? Or how are we going to know if this person actually wrote their essay or this story? Or you can tell, right? Because there's an authenticity of EQ that is missing from it, right? It can give you a good outline. It can sometimes give you a good place to start, but relying on it is a bad idea, right? And
And that
so,
kind of goes, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it goes back to not what can it do, but what is its best use. So you picked up on one of the posts I did recently where it talked about the nail gun versus the hammer. And
mhm,
AI, you might see as the nail gun, that when you're running down this is me, when I was young, helped my dad build houses, and they'd put down the big sheet of plywood, and he
Yep.
would chalk the lines that were the studs underneath the plywood. And that was my job, was to go down with the nail gun and just hit the studs, whatever, a foot apart. That was my job. You would never do that with a hammer. And that's like researching a company. We used to have to do it on Google, and you waded through individual Google results. Now that is a waste of time. You go into Perplexity, you do your company research, it puts it in a spreadsheet for you. That's the piece that you want to automate or speed up using AI, so that
Mm-hmm.
then you can go, the so what? What do I want to do with this information? How do I want to reach out? What does this mean for the value proposition I communicate in my resume? All of that still takes strategic thought that AI can help with, but it can't replace the hammer, your human brain, which is much more of a tool of precision. And that's what we're looking at, is how can the two come together? Because you go to AI, you say, write a sales resume, it's junk and it's fiction. You can't do that. You can't use that. Even if you do a little bit better prompt, it's still pretty much fiction. You've got to take the time to write your own stories, but AI can tell you which stories are going to appeal to the audience the most. And then it can tell you, did you get the right terms in that story once you've written it? But there's like this middle part that the human brain still has to be engaged, so that, like you said, you get that authenticity piece, you get the strategy, and you also get the truth, which is what recruiters are afraid they're not getting when they can tell it's AI generated.
Right. And I think, you lose credibility if you just rely on that too much. I mean, I think there's so many amazing things that AI can do. Again, listen, like we built our technology on AI, right? So I don't want to talk smack about it, because there's a lot of really amazing things that it can do. And we prefer, contextual AI, because contextual AI can infer and it can learn, right? And a lot of the tools that are out there, and I'm not going to name them because I want to come after me, but they're using patterned AI, right? So that's data in and that's data out. And there's a lot of platforms, I think, where their data isn't current, right? It's maybe 3 months old or it's 6 months old, and some of it can be even older. And it's important that you update, or that the platforms that you're using update their information more frequently than you think that they do. So in watching some of the events that you do, and the things that you post, the things that you talk about is building authentic relationships with clients. And what are some of the areas that you think, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but that where AI can fall short of showing that sort of authentic connection in the way that you're communicating? Like, what are some of the tells where, again, people are desperate to find jobs? Everyone says they're applying for jobs, they're not getting callbacks, and we can dive into that a little bit later if we've got time. But what are some of the things that you think people need to avoid when it comes to that level of
you
connection?
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, which is the automated messaging and the automated
Mhm.
commenting. So there's these technologies that have come out that'll say, oh, we'll automate messages to new LinkedIn profiles. And I've used some of them that will automate a welcome message in like an Instagram. So when you chat to my company on Instagram, there's an error. So don't go do it. You'll get this thing that says the server
Right.
has an error, because we're still figuring that why that's happening out. But there's a good piece of that, which is the responsiveness. Like, hey, we see you. And then a human's got to come in and do the real interaction. However,
Mhm.
like an automated message on LinkedIn, the challenge with those is that most of them pull from parts of the profile in ways that are really obvious. And so there are better ones than others. But that's just, you want to think about, is an automated message the first thing you want someone to see? When someone's reaching out to us on Facebook, I'm kind of okay with it, right? You get this automated message of, hey, we
Mhm.
got your message. But on LinkedIn, there's not that. I don't think there's a need for that. If you connect with me, Jennifer, that I need to send you an automated message right away. Like, is that necessary? for a recruiter, someone who's getting hundreds of connections, perhaps. But if
Yeah.
you're there as a job seeker, you're there as a thought leader. I just think that if you're there to build relationships, right? And don't use that piece of it for automation. And commenting, I can tell when your comment is auto generated, and I don't think it helps you achieve the goal you're trying to achieve.
So I totally agree with what you just said. But one of the things that I think really, oh God, be careful how I say this, but on LinkedIn, they've changed some of their algorithms, right? And so the faster you comment on posts and you make comments, then the more people that will see it and you reach a larger audience. And that's sort of a recent change, right? And I think, those of us who work on LinkedIn, but we also work in a lot of different areas, can't do that all the time, right? We can't comment on everything because it interrupts your flow, right? And so it's like, I feel like sometimes you're almost being punished because if you take your eye off LinkedIn, and I think that's why people set up so many of these different things, because they want it to increase their funnel and get more reach. But the negative part of that is that you also take the eye off the ball of what it is that you're doing. And then if you automate it, people know that you're automating it, and you end up with less credibility. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a recent catch-22, I think, on LinkedIn, which is, more based in AI.
Yeah, and I like to try to bring LinkedIn into the real world and come up with real world analogies.
Right.
So if you went to 100 networking events in a week, myself go away, sorry. If you went to 100 networking events in a week, okay, but all you did was show up, it doesn't do anything for you. Nothing.
Right.
You've done nothing. So automating comments on hundreds of posts is like going to 100 networking events. It's meaningless. It's vanity. It does nothing for you versus going to posts that really matter, posts of people you really want to connect with and having conversations. That's real networking. And so I think what people they get caught up in the numbers and the views and those types of things. And that's really not what it's about. Set up a system, and the AI could help you do this. Tools can help you do this. Set up a system so that you're engaged in the conversations that matter and you're focusing your energy there. And then if you want to post content or do some of the other things to try to build visibility, great. But that's different than networking.
Yeah. I mean, I think we get a lot of people who are like, how am I going to get someone's attention when, like, to your point, when people say the automated thank you, and my message inbox is always full of that. And I'm like, it's hard for me to get through the people that have an automatic response to the people that responded or I'm trying to connect with to get through it. Right. And time is important in these kinds of situations. Right. So, I mean, how do you think, I mean, and this is not quite an AI question, but how do you, kind of release yourself from that expectation that's been set, again, using AI as a tool or using some of these other things as a tool to stay engaged when really it could end up backfiring on you?
The backfire would be that you're not responding to something real, or
you're not responding, or the mental game of saying, okay, oh my God, I didn't do this. And is this going to affect my growth? Is this going to affect my reach and my connection and my presence? Right. Because I think there's a tie to this. I got to do this, or I'm not going to get through the recruiter. I'm not going to see the hiring manager. I'm not going to connect with my peers if I'm not actively engaged. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of emotional stress that goes with this because the whole landscape, and this goes for career coaches and resume writers and job seekers, right? And even when you're just trying to network and expand your group, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what's your suggestion?
Well, and this is so funny because it actually comes back to why coaching is so important.
Right.
Because all the how-to articles in the world, or you could ask ChatGPT for a strategy, but that's really not what the problem is. We all know what to do, but then we get in our own way around all the other stuff. Am I doing enough? What if I'm visible? And fear of success is just as powerful, right? What if I am more visible and that causes this or that or the other? It's focusing in on what really moves the needle for you. And there's a little
Mhm.
bit of experimenting phase that happens as you're getting into that. But I always tell my career coaches to think about what they teach your job seekers, right? You
Mhm.
teach your job seekers to focus on networking, not going to a billion events or getting speaking gigs. Like, as a job seeker, getting a speaking gig isn't really going to get you a job, right? There's gonna, unless you're win the lottery and the right person happens to be in the audience, it's
Mhm.
not a direct line. So posting content is more like having a speaking gig. You're standing up in front of an audience, you're hoping that people see it. There's a place for that, but it's not a direct line to a job. Direct lines to jobs come from reaching out strategically to people who are in organizations you're interested in, but that's scarier. And so this is what really the challenge is that it's less scary for some people to post content, to do some of those things, but it really isn't getting you anywhere. It's just
Hmm. Yeah.
smoke and mirrors. Whereas actually reaching out to the people that could hire you, reaching out to the people that would refer you business, reaching out to create those relationships is a more direct line to what you're achieving, but it's scary. And that's why a coach can help people do that.
I mean, again, so I know I took a purple squirrel to a different direction, but I think it ties together about what we are talking about, right? So like, and Lindsay, that's a really good question, but I just want to circle back to the AI thing for a second. Um, the you know, so in our career compass software, right? That we built for career coaches and resume writers really exclusively, right? And we built an AI interview module, right? And it's really great. But as great as it is, and it's a great tool for people because you can go back and be like, hey, this is the person that you coach, this is what you did. They go through the process. You can come back and see the results and be like, huh, that okay, so this is what we talked about, how you could answer. And to me, that's a really good example of like the humanity and the technology converging, right? So to give that tool to you as a coach to save time and be like, hey, here's your homework. Go through this tool, put in this job description and put the job title in, and you can do a mock interview, you can do interview questions, and you as a coach can go back and look at it instead of you having to take some of that time and then zero in on where the disconnect is and why people aren't getting the job, right? They might be getting the interviews, but they're not getting the job. And that's like where you as the career coach can look at that information, you can look at that data and go, oh, okay, Jennifer, I got it. Like, here is the gap, right? Like, this was a behavioral question and you answered it as the opposite of that, right? So what would you say, to that? Because I think that forming that connection and in giving you guys the tools, again, using AI for good, not AI for bad, and empowering career coaches to be better and to get more information in a shorter period of time.
Yeah,
Like,
and that's what AI is great at, is the analysis piece, so that we can focus on the human feedback and the feedback that goes on top of it, right? Layers on top of it, or the solutions of, so what? This system says that you use too many times, or you don't come across as confident, whatever. There's lots of systems that can give you a lot of different
right.
feedback.
Yeah.
But how does the person actually make a change? That's what they need the coach for, because that's going to take practice, repetition, feedback, and strategies that AI could give you some of, but it's going to give you the strategy up here, not the how do you deal with all the junk underneath, which every human brings? If you don't, like, I'd love to meet you if you just walk around up there with no junk, right?
Yeah, a lot of junk. Yeah.
Right, we've all got those insecurities and all of that, and that's what the coach is helping you not just know the strategy that ChatGPT or whatever could give you, but the how do I make that work for me? And that's really what we're talking about. And when you like look at networking, for instance, you can take AI. I love using some of the personality tools now that you can look at
Mm-hmm.
your LinkedIn profile. It'll tell you the
Yeah.
person's
Yeah.
personality.
Mm-hmm.
You combine that with some industry research that you could do on a tool like Perplexity. And now I'm not just asking ChatGPT, what questions could I ask at a networking event? No, I'm going to see this person. I'm going to talk to this person who's in this industry. What's going on in the trends? What do they care about as a personality? And then I can ask some really insightful questions at a networking event that show my expertise without me having to bleh my expertise all over them in an elevator pitch, which I'm not a fan of elevator pitches. But even AI could help you come up with a better elevator pitch if you really want to do it. But I love how it can help you come up with these questions because it's, way back to the non-AI days with Dale Carnegie. It's not about being interesting, right? It's about being interested. And you can use these tools because most people don't know what that means, right? They read Dale Carnegie, like, oh, sure, be interested. But now you can use these tools to get some really great questions that spur the conversation. I don't know if that fit into where you were headed.
No, I mean, it does, because I think, and first of all, anyone who hasn't looked or read Dale Carnegie, it's an oldie but a goodie, and it's worth going back and taking a look at some of that information, right, and reading it, because it still applies, and it definitely still applies to networking and how you position yourself, right? So to answer your question, yes, you did answer my question, so thank you. But I think the next sort of question that comes to mind, and how AI can be leveraged, and John, to answer your questions, I mean, there's, Claude AI is good, Perplexity is good, ChatGPT is good, Gemini is good, and they're all good for different things. Claude is probably a little bit more, maybe, like, I don't want to say emotional, right? But it sounds a little bit more human, right? And yes, I agree. Perplexity is great for research, and I think for I would say ChatGPT would be a second thing, for that. But I love that, when we look at, resume writers, and we look at career coaches, and we look at job seekers, and there's a really a big misconception out there. I think that people think they don't need a resume writer, or they think they don't need a career coach. And I can tell you, when I started Intry, right, and I said, I'm not going to do another startup, right? I'm done. Like, peace out. And I was like, I swear to God, I'm not going to do this again. But I didn't have a resume, right? And I was helping out someone that used to work for me, who I thought was one of the most talented people that I had ever met. I'm like, I couldn't figure out why they weren't getting an interview, right? So I created a resume. I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is really terrible. So I hired a resume writer, right? And I think, sometimes when we're talking about ourselves, it's hard to pull out those nuggets about who we are and what we are, and what we do, and the things that we're proud of, in context of what you put in a resume, and what you bring to an interview, and how you ask questions. And I think that is, again, like, where AI resume writers and career coaches converge, right? Because when I did that, like, my team and I created the first pre-lit Christmas tree back in the day, right? It didn't seem like that was like, that just seemed like, oh, well, everybody knows that I did that. Well, no, princess, everybody doesn't know that that's what you did. And it was nowhere on my resume, right? I mean, so there were these really big, important things, but until I worked with someone, I needed someone to pull out those nuggets. And I think, like, if you have the nuggets, AI can help you. If you don't have those nuggets, it's not generally going to be able to pull them out of you. And so, I think that's a really significant point in some of the things that you were just saying, is that you need that human part to marry with the technology part. And I think for coaches, AI can free up your time, right? Whether they use our, Career Compass, or if they use a different platform, it frees up your time. If they go through your training program, they're going to be more equipped to do the job. And they may go through your training program and be like, I'm not sure if I can do this, right? Or they may be able to, because, like, listen, it's like career coaching, it's kind of a gift, right? I think people can learn it, but you can really see when there's a great coach and when there is not, right? And again, that's sort of the human aspect of everything that we're talking about and what you're talking about with AI technology. And so you've talked a little bit about career professionals integrating AI into their practice. And obviously we're a big fan of that because we've done that. How do you see the role evolving to remain indispensable in the age of AI? And I think we both know how we would answer that, but to people who are listening, how would you answer that?
Yes. Well, and it's interesting because there's that trope. I think it's a trope already that the person AI is not going to take your job, but a person using AI is going to take your job. But what you don't read when you get that little one-liner cute quote is that the research actually showed experts using AI were heads and tails above non-experts using AI. And that's why a layperson going to use these tools to write their resume is not going to get the same result that a resume writer going to use these tools to write a resume is going to get. Why? Because you don't know what questions to ask. You don't know how to grade the output that you get. You don't know how to incorporate it. Now, that's not to say that people aren't getting help from AI on their own, but there is a difference from an expert using AI and a non-expert using the tools, because it layers on top of your expertise. It doesn't replace it. And that's important for people to understand, because you're going to be using AI in every job we do. It's like a computer, it's like a calculator, it's going to infiltrate every single job. And a lot of jobs it already has. And the OpenAI launch just made it more public. But AI, I teach AI, is like AI has been around since the 50s. It was popular in the 90s. There wasn't a business case for it right away, so it kind of hung out there in the shadows. But it's not new. It's been around. It's been in a lot of even the things we do in careers. It's been in career assessments forever. It's been in career assessments. And so we've been using it. Now there's just new tools enabled by it that we're going to keep using. And our expertise comes alongside the tool. So when I teach people to use it, it's how to use it alongside that piece. And it's coming together with it. Because if you try to replace yourself with it, you get worse results. And that's not what we're trying to get.
100%. And I think, like, listen, you guys, AI is not going away, right? And I think we have to be really mindful too that right now there really are no guardrails on it. It's kind of the Wild West. And so as just a note of caution that I'm sure everybody knows, don't put your name and stuff. Don't put your company and stuff. Don't put personal information in there. I'm sure you guys all saw the Microsoft article, where there's a class action lawsuit where they say they weren't using your personal information to build their AI database, but they indeed were.
And the latest one is LinkedIn. LinkedIn was using your private messages to train their AI. Oops.
I mean, and they can, because there aren't any rules against it. There's no legal rules that say that they can't do certain things at this juncture, right? And so,
well, and I always tell people, no matter what you put on the internet, even if you think your Facebook profile is private, everything you put on the internet can be found. everything. And even if you delete it, there's this fun little thing called the Wayback Machine where I can go and find something you did 10 years ago. If I know what I'm looking for, what site it was on, I can go and find it. So the same is true with AI. I know now you can opt out of letting AI train with your LinkedIn profile, but it already did it. Like that was happening for a year before they even created the thing to let you opt out. And even then I wouldn't bet on that it's opted out. So you could see that as a negative, but I also see it as a positive because it means that you don't get too hesitant about using the tools. Yes, you don't want to put your name in it. You don't want to put contact info in it, but anything that was already on your LinkedIn profile, why not use that to help you? So if you want to ask AI to help you write a better headline, you're going to give it some context with your existing profile or your existing resume, strip out that content that you don't want, your contact info, your name, maybe even your company names. But we don't want to be so afraid that we're not getting the use out of the tools that they're there for. We just want to be cautious and thoughtful around how we use them.
And I think one thing is really important is that, be careful about sharing other people's information in your AI process, right? Because you could be sharing something that that person doesn't want to know, and you can't take that back, right? So, AI is only as good as the humans that are guiding it, right? And I think we all kind of know that the prompts, the insights, the critical thinking that's been applied to the AI outputs are what make it valuable, right? And there are different platforms, and some are better than others, right? So the importance of career professionals as curators and interpreters of AI generated data is really important. So, I mean, you shared some examples about career professionals integrating AI into their practice. How can career coaches and resume writers position themselves as, the human layer, right?
Yeah. So we've been talking about this in our resumes, especially because a resume seems like an easy place, but even career coaching, people think they can get that online from an AI coach. And what we're seeing is that the peak for that has almost already happened. People have figured out that AI can't write their resume. And so they're already starting to reach back out to resume writers. So I think that period of thinking that it replaced humans was actually pretty short. Yay, we learned quickly as a human race. I like it. But as for a coach, actually, this was a session we did in December for our audience. And we got together and we went through a whole positioning session of how do you position yourself as the expert with AI. We don't want to say, I don't use AI, come and work with me. So for an example, here in the US, at least, we have to go get taxes done. And there are software that do taxes for some people. And if you weren't paying a tax professional before, now you have this extra benefit of a software that will help you a little bit more. But if you were paying for a tax professional before, the software did not replace that tax professional for most people. In fact, the research shows that more people use tax preparers now. But I would never go use a tax preparer who said, I don't use tax software. I would never do that. Right? Because now you're saying, okay, we're going to throw out a very helpful tool and just trust on your ability to know everything. No, I want someone who knows everything and who uses the tool to make sure that they don't miss anything. So the career coach is the same thing. We want to position ourselves as the additional value we add beyond what the software can bring. That's the so what, how do I make this work for me? Because you can get the generic outputs from the systems, but that still doesn't help you bring it to action. And that's what coaching has always been great for. Action plan, accountability, and all the junk, all the junk underneath what we know we need to do, because that's usually not what keeps us from executing, is knowing what to do.
That's such a great answer. And so one of the things, so kind of circling back to what you just said and what we were talking about before that, AI tools, if not used correctly, can create a sense of detachment and can overwhelm, right? And, one of the things I've also learned in AI is that, the more you kind of try to drill down, the more that the AI model gets confused, right? About where it is that you started and where it is that you end up, right? So I think you have to be really careful in how some of those things are used and understanding how you prompt some of those things. Because, like a human, is going to be needed to provide context and the emotional support and the ethical guidance of sort of how to use it, not only just from the developers, but again, when we built software and I built different, telemedicine platforms or disaster relief, or we're in HR tech and we're building that now. We've, launching this new service. One of the things that we really focus on is the ethical use of it, and how is it being used and how is it being tracked, and it's only as good as the data that you put in is the data that you get out. So bad in, bad out, right? And so, um, you know, again, we started Intry in the beginning because we realized that some of the resumes not getting through wasn't an HR issue. It wasn't a resume writer issue. It wasn't a recruiter issue or a career coach. It was a technology issue, right? And frankly, for me, that was really shocking, right? To see some of that bubble to the top. And we've talked about software. It takes a long time to build if you're going to do it right. And you know we've seen a lot of bias that has been built into technology, right? I mean, if you look at like when camera phones came out, right? And if you were a person of color, your pictures didn't come out right. And when the Google phone launched their corrective one, it still didn't get it right. And so I think that it's really important that we talk about how it's used ethically, and making sure that the information that you're putting in, but more importantly, that the information you're getting out, that it's a representative of who you are and what it is that you're looking for, right? Because there is a lot of technology bias that's based in because it's all written by humans.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And we can also play on that. So as coaches, one of the things that we talk about a lot is one, just like you would never do an assessment never gives you one answer. Like this is your dream career, or this is your ideal career. So never ask AI to do that. Even as a layperson, please never go to AI and say, here's my resume. What's the ideal job for me? No, it is baking in all those biases. It's biased in the way it reads your resume.
yep.
And by the way, does your resume even have the things you really want to do on it, or just what you've done? But we use it in brainstorming. And what I want to recognize is that all humans also have bias and we have limited worldviews. So, what I love about these technologies is that instead of just having the worldview of me and my client in the room, we have now this expansiveness and we can recognize its biases and we can kind of play with those. So, one thing is I'll be careful with the information I put in. If I put in that I'm working with a nursing student, right away, I've baked in some assumptions, whether I was talking to a human or a technology, I've baked in some assumptions there.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what data do I really need to put in? Is it causing bias or not by what I'm putting in? But I can also play with it on the back end. So, I could say, what about careers for a male nurse? And, just see, will it give me anything different? Because
Yep.
I know it might have that bias, I can play around with it. And since I'm using it for brainstorming and for expanding, it's actually it's countering my bias because I already have bias and coaches, that's part of what we learn is to admit that, to work with it, to be aware of that. But now I've got this other system which may also have a bias, but hopefully if we work together in the right way, we can actually expand and eliminate the effect of that bias on my client, which is really the goal, versus either of us coming alone and having that bias.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's interesting what you just said about switching it to a male nurse. So, we do constant testing, right? Like, where are we at? What is the feedback? Where it's, it's like a pinball machine, right? And, there's things that we put in so we get information back, right? And I thought, I'm gonna apply for this job, right? I did it as myself, and it was like 100% match, which is almost, okay, I'm gonna say 99 because nothing is 100%. No feedback, zero, bupkis. And I was like, huh. And this is, I'm just gonna say, this is with a recently launched ATS, right? New, right? And I was like, okay, so this is interesting. Let me do this. And then I changed it from Jennifer to Jason. Okay. I literally got a call back in 10 minutes. Right. And so
Yep.
as I was investigating this company, and I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want anyone to come back and be like, you slandered my company. Um, is is instead of just relying on just the software, they can put in questions and be like, you can put in filters and be like, we're really looking for, a man for this role, or really looking. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, that's a whole new level of filtering and scoring. And so just for funsies, I took the interview, right, which was a Zoom. Imagine their surprise when it was a woman. I mean, I'm just, probably shouldn't do that on a regular
It's
basis.
hilarious. I mean, it's not, but very few companies are doing that. I think we should say that, right? Very few companies are doing that. Some companies are doing it unknowingly because the system does have its own bias. But of course, you can, and sometimes it makes sense, although we don't like it, right? College recruiters, people that are recruiting folks straight out of college, they're going to program some of that in. We're looking for recent grads because that's who our position is kind of made for. And I think they're starting to do less of that because it may not make as much sense as it used to in the old workforce. But there's reasons people were doing it that were maybe somewhat legit. Then there's these outlandish things people are doing that make no sense. And then there's kind of the unaware badness that's happening in the middle.
I think there's both, right? I mean, I think there's both.
Yeah.
I think it's like, you've got someone and they have this is their mindset, right? And you can't convince them otherwise, right? Like, and so, and I just think those are things that we got to keep in mind when we're talking about AI, right? And in some cases, I think, like, if you're applying for a job, just use your initial. Like, you don't necessarily require your entire first name to get through some of these ATSs. Anyway, I digress. But I just thought that was worth noting because I was like, that is really interesting. I want to see exactly the why behind this. So um, I think we've talked a lot about the bias and AI algorithms that require human oversight. Um, so in what you coach, and when you coach career professionals and career coaches to do what they do, one of the things that I think all coaches do, but particularly like career coaches and resume writers and things like that, AI doesn't handle emotions like a job loss or the grief or imposter syndrome. Um, how do you think that career coaches fill these emotional gaps that AI can't?
Well, that's such a vivid example. So I tested one of the big name, big company career coaches, and I came in and I said, my boss is ignoring me, they're squishing me, they're trying to keep me in my place, and I'm so frustrated, right? And I just kind of tried to overdo the emotion. And what did Miss Amy say? I'm sorry to hear about that. How can I help you? Like, it's just that, and I know they're getting better, but you're still one. Then she moved into giving me advice. So she recognized my emotion for like a millisecond and then moved into giving me advice. And a good coach is going to understand how to do that dance because we don't want to stay
Right.
stuck in the emotion, but we do want to help you feel the emotion and process it. And now there's training in trauma-informed coaching. And there's a bunch of my colleagues out there helping people understand how trauma is not just stuff that happens to us when we're little or being in war or whatever. Like, there is trauma that is happening to people in the workplace, and we need to have a trauma-informed approach. Doesn't mean that we're a counselor, and we still get those people on the team when we need them, but that we're coming at it from a different place than we would have even 2 years ago, understanding how to help people
Mm-hmm.
move through that process in a way that I don't know if I ever see technology being able to. I know that it's getting there, but it's
And
just a human
it is
thing.
traumatic. Like, I don't,
Right.
I mean, it's, you can't minimize someone that's been in a career for, 15 or 20 years, and then they're part of a reduction in force,
Yeah.
right? That's traumatic. Or, I'm going to use like Austin as an example, right? There have been so many people that have moved here. They had technology jobs, and then, they moved their entire families. They bought homes. They got involved in the community, and, like 6,000 people were let go. That's
Yeah.
traumatic.
Well, we were just talking about it today with the hiring freeze for federal folks, and
Yep.
being told that
Yep.
you might have to move or your research funding is cut. And
Oh,
that's like, there's a huge part of our country being
I
traumatized
know.
right now with all of this
That's a whole other
uncertainty.
conversation.
Right. Well, and just the job side of it, not the political side of it, but the real life job side of it of, yeah, like, what do you do when you come in and you don't know if you're going to have a job tomorrow?
Yeah.
Technology can't help you with that.
No,
That's the challenge.
and I think, circling back to, and I just want to point out, Marie, we just put Marie's website. You guys probably already know it, but if you don't, check it out. The, um, the dynamics of how you get a job, how you look for a job, have changed dramatically in the last 5 years. I mean, and even more so, I think, even in the last year, right? Everything has really changed. And I'll make this quick so we can get to everybody's questions or anything that we missed. But, I think it's even more important when you talk about building a network and how do you network. So when we circle back to Lindsay's question, see, Lindsay, I didn't forget about your promise. When you talk about the importance of networking, and, I'm just going to add one thing, and then I'm going to let you answer that question, is it's got to be authentic. I mean, you can use a bot, you can do some of these things, but that does not replace the authentic message of, like, when I reached out to Marie, right? It's, I saw one of her posts and I was like, oh my gosh, we need to talk. Right. And that was my gut reaction. And then I sent a note. You can't, that's hard to mimic, right? It's hard to imitate that. So with everything that you're saying, and for job seekers, resume writers, for career coaches, what's your advice on that? Right? Because people only have so many hours in a day. So,
And that's the challenges. And you were talking about it earlier with social media. And this is, again, a little bit cliche, but we really do want to focus on the quality of those connections versus the quantity, and the quality of your social media engagements versus the vanity metrics of views and those types of things. Unless your goal is to be an influencer. Now, if your goal is to be an influencer, then that's a whole different conversation. But if your goal is to even be a thought leader, get a job, you are focused is on the quality of those relationships, both in terms of the authenticity and the depth that you're talking about, as well as the quality in terms of how do they fit into the strategy of what matters for you. And when I'm working with coaches who are trying to build their business, this is actually one of the most challenging things, is like, who do I want to engage with? And when you don't know that, and most coaches don't, when you don't know that, you're flying around trying to do quality or trying to do quantity because you
right.
don't know how to choose the quality. And job seekers are often the
Oh
same. Like, what
my God,
companies,
you got to write
what,
that down.
yeah,
You don't know how to choose the quality. Like, everybody take a note, write it down, because I think we've got in this mindset of, like, more is better. And sometimes less is more.
yeah. Yeah. And once you know those relationships you really want to keep, Then you can use tools to help you set up the process. I was just watching through this with an executive yesterday. I do a little tiny bit of LinkedIn executive coaching on how to use LinkedIn. And he said, first thing people always start up with is, oh, I want to create content. And I back the truck up and I say, we don't want to start with content. We don't want to
Right.
start with content. Unless your goal is to become an influencer, we don't want to start with content. We want to start with connections and engagement. And then you move into content when you start to see that, hey, you've got something you want to say too. But when you do that second, you're actually going to get more engagement because you started with the relationship first. And so it's relationship first and then visibility versus visibility to a relationship. Unless you happen to have $1 million like Coca-Cola and you can advertise anywhere you want to advertise, we tend to look at big business marketing and try to replicate it. And as small businesses or job seekers, that model doesn't work for us. We have to look more at like grassroots marketing, your nonprofit. That's the type of model you want to use. Who's your target audience? Who do you want to engage with, and go out and build real relationships with them, starting from the ground up.
Right. I mean, and I think, that circles back to that you can't boil the ocean.
Yeah.
Right. What's your market and how do you go after it? So, all right. So we've got a few minutes left. So I want to go back to Kathy. So Kathy's question was, when we realize there is bias, would we really want to work for that company? A question to ask yourself as a job seeker. 100%. Right. I mean, sometimes you don't even know if there's bias there. Right. But in that particular instance where I started as Jennifer and then I turned into Jason, probably not. Right.
Yeah, and we also have to check our privilege a little bit there. There's people that many career coaches work with who may not have as many options geographically, travel limited, whatever. And so we might need to explore that a little bit more to make sure, where is the bias? How will it impact me? Is this something I can deal with or not? Because everybody has bias and every workplace is biased. I always come to the data point that 86% of people are biased against people who are overweight, which means that even people who are overweight are biased against people who are overweight. So bias exists everywhere. We have to be a little bit careful with too knee-jerk reaction. I never want to be anywhere that doesn't appreciate me. But to judge too fast is also perhaps not helpful.
100%. I mean, I think it's like, why for us as a technology company, it's an evolution, right? It's fluid. We're learning, we're evolving, we're changing, and mindful, right? And I think that's like something we're super proud of, right? Is building something that is a really great tool. When we started out in the B2C and now we're in, going to the people that are actually doing it, that are, again, the human part merging with the technology part. So, all right, Deborah, is this a question for us? With the introduction of Stargate initiative, what training or degree should we recommend to our clients, electronics, engineers, business intelligence, cybersecurity? That might be directed at Melody. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, so I would just say it's a fascinating program that actually Peak Careers offers on the careers of the future. But to remember that just because technologies are advancing doesn't mean that every job is a technology job. So we will still need salespeople, marketers, all those folks. So we as career professionals, our goal is to help people understand what their strengths and skills are and to find roles that maximize those. We don't want to push everyone to be a technical person. And in fact, that doesn't make sense. So yes, the technologies are growing and a lot of the new jobs will be created by those technologies, but not every job is going to be technical.
Right.
So we still want to help people find degrees that match with their skill sets, with their strengths, with the things that work for them. And then the industry that they plug into may do that. But those are going to move really quickly. They're going to change really fast. So we don't want to get too caught up in any one thing either. We are creating skill sets that are leverageable, packageable, like grab your briefcase of skills and go. And so it's just not, we're looking at degrees that train people for the future, sure, but understanding that they're still going to constantly need to reskill. There's not going to ever be a perfect degree for the future.
Well, and I think, one of the things that we really have to keep in mind, I think, is that the you know, the world has changed. It's not like you're going to go work at IBM and you're going to be there for 30 years, or you're going to work at General Mills and you're going to be there for 25 years, or you're going to work at, I can't think of another company right now, but you're not going to be there forever, and your career is going to evolve. That is just the way the future is going to be, right? And that makes it scary, but it also makes it, real. And you've got to upskill, and you've got to make yourself relevant as the market continues to change. And I know we've got to go. One thing I just wanted to say is, listen, AI can process data, but it can't understand, the dreams, the fears, the motivation. That's where humans come in, right? That's where
Yep.
career coaches and resume writers come in to bridge that gap, right? So before we
To transform the people.
100%. So first, does anybody have any other questions before we sign off? And then, I think, Marie, I've got a closing question for you, and feel free to answer it, or you can answer it in your own way. Is, if there's one thing you'd want, job seekers and career professionals to take away from this conversation about the role of AI, what would it be?
It's a tool. Yeah, it's a tool. It's not the answer. It's never going to give you the answer. It's an idea generator. It's an analytics tool. You will still have to come up with the answer. And that's empowering, right? You're still in charge. You're still in the driver's seat. It can also be scary because no one's going to do it for you. And I think when it comes right down to it, we all want an easy button, and we were hoping that that's what AI would be. But there isn't an easy button for your career. There isn't an easy button for life. And that's why you have people around you that can help you get through it.
I mean, couldn't have said that better. Human connection is going to be what drives career success. Right?
Right.
So listen, everybody, thank you so much for joining us and all the great questions. And if you've got any questions for either me or Marie, feel free to email us. We put, I think, Maria's and website in the chat, and ours as well. So we really appreciate it. If you guys want to share this with people, we would love it. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me.